everyone, it's Pickles. I hope you guys are all doing well. I'm so happy to have you back here at my channel. I'm sorry, I know it's been a little while since I posted my last video. I wasn't feeling great last week, so I just took some time to get some rest, but I am doing better now and so excited to share more videos with you guys and to keep talking about Latin. So today we are going to be discussing the legal system and how Latin has endured in the legal system. So before I ramble on too much, let's just get into it. So obviously Latin has endured into modern society in a number of ways, but personally I think its presence in the Western legal system is one of the more obvious, one of the more clear, and definitely one of the most interesting, because there's really no one answer as to why. It's a combination of things. So today we are going to be diving into some of those reasons, talking about that, and also looking at different Latin terms in the legal system and what they mean. So let's jump into our first reason, which has to do with communication. So a primary reason that Latin is still used in the legal system today is because it's essentially a lingua franca. And by that, what I mean is that no matter where you're from or what language you speak, Latin provides a standard, constant method of communication for lawyers. Even if, for example, there are lawyers who speak the same language but maybe speak different dialects or use slang words or anything like that, by using Latin, you get rid of any complication that could cause because it's a standard. It means the same thing, Latin has stopped developing as a language. It doesn't change anymore. And Latin in the legal system takes roots in some classical, some ecclesiastical Latin, but there are rules for it. It's super standard. So it provides a really easy way for lawyers and courts to communicate within themselves and between among each other. And really just avoids any complications and any confusions. But as to why Latin was in the legal system in the first place, we're going to have to take a closer look at the educational system. So this is, education provides more of a background as to why Latin was used in the legal system a few hundred years ago. It's not as relevant today, and I'll talk about why soon. But essentially, the reason why lawyers used Latin is because it proved you were indeed a qualified and professional in your field. You're a qualified lawyer. Because law schools, or any school that you went to study law, they had Latin as a requirement, and usually Greek as well. So by using Latin in the court, you're proving hey, I've passed my exams, I am really meant to be here, and I am a professional in my field. This isn't as relevant today because in the 1900s, most schools actually took out that requirement, so it is not a requirement, but it is, highly recommended because it's still used. So continuing our look at that history of why Latin was used in the courts, we're going to have to jump all the way back to our friends in ancient Rome. So a lot of the Western legal system, especially used in Europe, has its roots in ancient Roman systems. Because ancient Rome did have a system of law. It was not perfect. It does not resemble what we use today in many ways. But the foundations of that influenced the foundations of legal systems in European kingdoms especially. And because ancient Rome, had geographically spread across so much of Europe, as kingdoms and empires kind of came out of that, they took influence and they took inspiration from the systems that were used in ancient Rome. Henceforth, the language also continued, especially in written texts. And this is, incredibly important to understand the modern legal systems, especially in, Western world, Europe and America, especially. But it is, even more important when we are trying to understand constitutional law. So why constitutional law, you may be thinking? That's the United States of America. We are an ocean away from where the ancient Romans were. But here's the thing. Early American settlers came from Europe. So when the framers of the Constitution, Revolutionary era, were setting up the document and setting up other documents in the founding era, they took a lot of influence and inspiration from European systems, but also European documents, especially in the Enlightenment. So Enlightenment documents from lawyers, from politicians, from thinkers. And because Latin was so heavily used there, to understand the documents, the framers also had to understand Latin. And, domino effect, consequently, for us to now understand the Constitution, we have to not just be able to read the document itself, but to understand the documents which inspired its writing. And therefore, constitutional lawyers also need to know Latin to interpret the Constitution. And this is really because there are English words used then, which have very different meanings than how we use them today, because back then they were tied much more closely to their Latin roots. One example of this, it comes up in the preamble, in order to form a more perfect union. So today when we think of the word perfect, we think of, you can't make anything better than this. This is as good as it can get. So how can something be made more perfect? Well, the meaning behind the word perfect was actually very different then, because it was tied to the Latin root perficere, from which it comes. And perficere actually means finished. So by saying in order to form a more perfect union, what the writers of the Constitution were trying to imply was not that this is as good of a union as we're getting, but this is going to be a more complete and a more unified union. Alright, so those are some of the reasons why Latin is used in the legal system, and you can essentially see the common thread there is that it's exactly that. It's a common thread, and there's a standard manner of interpretation that everyone can understand, no matter what language you speak or where you're from. So now that we've looked at that, let's move on and look at some common Latin legal terms and their meanings. So one term you may have heard of before is habeas corpus. So this literally means you may have the body. That's the literal translation. Habeas means you may have, and corpus means body. And what we use it to mean is that you are bringing someone before a court. So like a witness before a court. So that's if you're telling the court, look, you may have this body, this person. Another term which is pretty common you may have heard of on the news is subpoena. So subpoena literally means under the penalty, and what it means now, what we interpret it as, is an order commanding someone to appear in court. So you subpoena a person you want to appear in court. A little bit rarer term, one we don't use as much, is corpus delicti. Literally, corpus means body, delicti means of the crime, body of the crime. And what courts think it means, what they interpret it as, is material evidence in a crime. So anything material found on the crime scene or that has to do with the crime, it's corpus delicti. Another term which you may not have heard of is in camera. It actually has nothing to do with the camera that you're thinking of, like the camera that I'm filming with, nothing like that. It means in a room. Camera means room in Latin. So the courts interpret this to mean in private. And lastly, the term affidavit means he or she pledged in Latin. It's a verb, but it has turned into a noun now, and it means a sworn or written statement, so a pledged statement. So you can really see through those terms how the meaning of the terms used in the court are still pretty close to their original Latin. So by using them, you really clear up any confusion, lingua franca, common understanding. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I had a really fun time researching this because, like I mentioned at the start, there's no one answer to this. There's no textbook answer as to why Latin is used in the legal system. It's a combination of different things, and it all really has to do with how societies have developed and the influence of ancient cultures. So Like I said, I had a lot of fun sharing that with you. I'm not going to tell you what we're going to be talking about in the next video, but it is going to be super fun, so you should definitely come back and check that out. If you're enjoying this content, hit subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and be sure to keep a lookout for the new videos. But until then, I hope everyone's summer is going delightfully, and I'll see you soon. Bye!